which is always an interesting opportunity to actually massage the public very specifically. A conference in Vienna on urban prototyping, a design conference in Frankfurt, in Liechtenstein, Cologne, Malaysia, Munich, and we do exhibitions. You can see this stuff basically on our website, that's why I just give it very quickly to give you an understanding of our profile. Monographic show about a Berlin-based office, Reality United. That's about a graphic design firm. I'm talking about this project later on, 2x4 from New York. Office from Slovenia, Salabuka, monographic small gallery exhibition. Okay, but first of all, what is architecture? Our firm in subtitle is described as Architekturvermittlung in German, that would be the title. It's something like architectural communication, how to communicate architecture. Now, for that it's important also to understand not only how you communicate architecture, but also to define what is actually architecture for you. And for us, there is the difference between the architecture with a capital A, that's what you guys are concerned with most of the times, and there's also an architecture with a lower case, A. Something that Bernard Rudolphy called for instance, vernacular architecture, architecture without architects. And we think that type of architecture is immensely important to the architecture with the capital A, and only if these two discourses of production are really very well synchronized, you get something interesting. So basically, I consider most of today's star architecture fairly boring because it has lost the relationship to an everyday type of production of buildings. The type of buildings like this, I found this building in Split, and I found it very interesting because I couldn't figure out what was there before. The small house, the big house, this is an act of renovation. Did somebody bought the lower apartment and wanted to simulate that this was a house before? It was actually then crowned by this multi-family housing. That was very interesting. This looks like Turbo Folk in Serbia, but this is actually in Mexico. With a very beautiful markt in the Andes. This is Ottawa. And sometimes these are things that escape our definition of beautiful, but it's also not really possible to say that it's ugly. And every time a building has this quality, I'm quite fascinated by it. Something that forces us to push our boundaries of definition. This is almost like a copy of the Guggenheim in, where was this? I think in Guadalajara, Mexico. And the interesting thing is this building is in the background, and then there's these buildings here. There's a distance of 20 meters. And once this building was painted, this is actually a shopping mall, a circular shopping mall, quite beautiful. These guys started to paint their buildings in colors that reacted to those. And I think it's a nice way of creating a fabric rather than objects. This is a car repair shop in Malaysia, made entirely basically, or whose walls are entirely materialized out of car objects, seats, spoilers, everything. And I'm sure there was not an architect designing it, but for me it's a really architectural act. This is a fascinating phenomenon for me. As a German, we have this discourse of being tidiness, disciplined, and well structured, and so on. And I make a photographic documentation series of German airports, and the incredible phenomenon that basically the ceiling, the suspended ceiling, very often is actually taken away because there's always maintenance work to be done on the air conditioning system. And this contradicts the German self-image of being well-ordered and structured and tidy and something like this so massively. However, the performance of the system is stronger, because there needs to be, some guy already repairing it. At some point they accept that this suspended ceiling doesn't make sense, they put it off, and then they can repair it all the time. So for me this is an interesting victory of performance over representation. This is a parking garage of what used to be the biggest biggest shopping mall in the world, Ala Moana in Honolulu in Hawaii. You see, we travel a lot. I mean, until we had the kid, we used to travel a lot. And what is interesting is we're just leaving the shopping mall and we see this thing here. This is an aqua massage device. So you go out of the shopping mall because your body has tormented of all this shopping, and then you get a nice aqua massage, and then you can get in your car and drive home. So this idea to program the transitional space between a shopping mall and a parking garage I found quite interesting. And also here, the facades that way and that way, they're all programmed with shops. In our context, parking garages are basically abysmally treated. There is no programming whatsoever, and that's why they're also spaces of fear. There's an illegal market in Mexico, an industrial warehouse. Quite nicely. That's the most beautiful university campus I've ever seen. The university, UNAM is called, University Nacional, the Autonomous National University of Mexico, in Mexico City, with an incredible big public open space that is just marvelous. Snooker in Hong Kong underneath a highway. So you have never a problem with rain. And it's 24-hour open, and there's a lot of noise, but it doesn't matter because it's you make noise yourself, right, with the balls. But spaces like these are architectural moments for us. This was in Seoul at the actually, it was stupid that when in 2006, when the soccer championship were in Germany, we had to have a lecture tour in Korea. So we couldn't watch soccer at home. But then we were watching soccer in Seoul, which was even more fascinating because you see here, that's the biggest plaza in the city, and there was a crowd of 100,000 people. And the amazing thing is, it was not violent at all. It was totally quiet. There were people with their entire families, with their kids. And these people, they all sit. They took a piece of newspaper, laid it on the ground, and placed their bottoms on it. And then they had these red little lights. That's I think the icon of the Korean team, the Red Devils. And it was entirely silent until they were scoring, of course. But this was an incredible moment because it was totally peaceful and yet incredibly, massively populated. It's an experience that was quite worthwhile. Cemetery in Hawaii, which is where you don't have gravestones. The graves are actually flush on the ground, and there's flowers that stick out. And these people there, they're actually making they make a commemoration party of the dead. It was I think it was the 24th of December. On that day they make it, and they basically eat for hours and stay for hours. And it was a kind of a gay moment, a happy moment. And for me, as somebody who always gets sad and depressed on a graveyard, it was a very liberating experience. This is in Barcelona, where kids use the CCCB, one of the buildings of the CCCB campus, to actually perform their MTV choreographies that they have learned. You see, it has its advantages of not reading Foucault, because you can do something with transparency that doesn't make you depressed. And this basically brings us to the topic that is probably very, very important for us, which is the one of appropriation. This is a film still from a film I like a lot by Jacques Tati. It's called Jour de Fête. I don't know the English name. It's one of his earlier films. And in it, he shows, as in many other films, Tati shows ways how he can actually how he can make use of something that exists instead of having to invent it. So this guy basically had the idea, he's the postman, and he had the idea he can deliver the mail quicker if he doesn't stamp it in his office, but if he stamps it hitchhiking on a truck and sort of misusing a loading plane as a desk and doing it while traveling. In a later film, Mon Oncle, there's this very beautiful scene where the uncle of the Arpels, played by Jacques Tati, is staying with his sister, this charming lady making, sort of undusting this completely uncomfortable couch that hurts, when you just look at it, because you can understand that it actually will be a pain in your back when you try to sit on it. And one night, she and her husband go to the opera, and they're unkind enough not to invite her brother. So he has a drink somewhere, and he comes home pretty drunken, and he doesn't find the way to the bed, or they haven't shown him where he'd sleep. And what happens is this: they come home, and they're completely amazed what a mess he created. However, he actually didn't create a mess. He created sense out of a senseless situation, because you can't do much with this thing. This is an object of representation. It is meant to represent an object that could be useful, but it isn't. He turns it into something by flipping it by 90 degrees, into something that actually becomes quite useful. It almost looks like a vernacular version of Le Corbusier's, Chaise Longue. And they obviously are quite mad about this, but I think it's exactly the type of activity that we need from people in relationship to architecture. So this is the quality in using architecture that we try to promote and propagate in our projects, and that's why we did one exhibition that was called Appropriate Design. And I will show, it was a series of exhibitions, small exhibitions, monographic, in a larger exhibition, hybrid kind of thing of an exhibition in the Fair of Design Producers in Frankfurt. And we made small exhibitions about a couple of designers, and one of them was a New York graphic agency called 2x4. This was the space, this is how it looked. So it looked like a chic fair kind of thing, but still slightly pornographic. It wasn't meant to look commercial, but obviously these things are commercial as well. And the thing that we did was this piece here, you see where you see the many yellow stuff. Basically what happens is 2x4 made a very interesting idea, because the entire topic of the event was identity, private identity, which is, I think, a fairly horrendous title. And they made a polemic piece about this concept, which is basically 500 unique t-shirts, yellow t-shirts with a unique design on the front. They were vacuumed in plastic foil, transparent, and arranged like you see here. Quite a beautiful installation. People could look at them and they could buy them for 25 euros. When you would buy that one, you would be photographed holding the piece in front of you. The photograph would be printed on yellow paper. You actually see it in the back here. And hung at the place where the t-shirt was hanging before. And that means over the 3-day duration of the show, it was a very short thing, this pop-up t-shirt shop transformed into a portrait gallery. It was a photography exhibition in the end. And everybody obviously made a statement about his or her own identity by the choice of the t-shirt. Actually, there's a very nice website, or actually you can find them all on Flickr if you look for 2x4. There's unfortunately no internet here, otherwise I could have shown you quickly. Something completely different, a show that we call cross-atmosphering. We're very interested in the capacity of architecture to create a second layer to program. So we're interested in the capacity of architecture to, for instance, make a swimming pool that has a library atmosphere, to bring an example of Bernard Schuli. And we were using this approach in a show about the Slovenian office Sadavuga, because we had the feeling they work with this type of atmospheric ambiguity every once in a while. And we were doing this in